charity is a different story. It's an education. We'll talk more, but a good Shabbos, and Hashem should give you, we're in the week between the Rebbe's yard site, the previous Rebbe's yard site. Rebbe Kramer started off by the previous Rebbe, then the Rebbe. The blessings from both of them for you, Edith, your children, grandchildren. This week was Robin's Jewish birthday. Was 2 days ago, so you should have a lot of nachas, only beautiful things. Okay, great. Be well. Thanks. Bye-bye. Good Shabbos. Hello. You're unmuted. You're muted, I mean.
Am I the only one here?
No. Are you on your phone?
I am. Oh, do I have to
on
get
your phone?
on?
You only see one person at a time.
I'm on my phone.
Okay.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
With us?
So I just went for a long walk with Lindsay Rothstein, and she sends her regards.
Okay. Send her back. I've been a little out
I
of
will,
touch with
but
her.
she's gone now.
But
Yeah, she said to me, you were so fantastic. She's so happy now. It's so nice.
I'm good. I try to reach out to tell her she should not just say hi through you.
Yeah. No, I know. She's in love with Terry Benarosh. It's all good,
Baruch Hashem, this is beautiful.
Yeah. She's. Who's on the call?
I'm on.
Claudia.
Hi.
Hi, Rabbi.
Sarah.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, Lara.
Hi.
Hi, Rabbi, I just want to introduce you to Catherine Cohen, who's joining us today.
Hi, Catherine. Nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Very well. So my name is
I have
Moshe.
to apologize. I have to get off because I have an appointment at noon because I scheduled that before I knew I was
Perfect.
joining. So I'm apologizing now when I disappear, but next week I won't double book.
Okay. You won't
And
double book or
Catherine,
double
meet
dip.
Debbie.
Beautiful. It's
Debbie,
nice to have
Catherine.
you on. And any part
Hi.
is good. Hello, Sarah. Hello,
Hi,
Mati.
Catherine.
Hi, all.
Welcome.
Robbie.
So good.
Oh my
to
God,
see
is
you.
my cousin on?
Yes.
Wow.
Apparently.
Hi, Moti.
Yes,
Hi,
he is.
how are you?
Mati's here. We have the Southern Hemisphere.
I love
Actually, soon, a little later today, Mati.
Yes.
I learn with someone every Friday on the phone, 15 minutes before Shabbat. So he's now into Amazon. He's a guy who has a lot of money and he's helping protect their acres and acres of Amazon. So he's in the Amazon. So very soon we're going to get on with the Amazon and do a little shiur with in the Amazon. Not far from you.
Not far. So I'll be seeing you down there.
Rabbi, I'm curious, why 16 minutes before Shabbat?
No, not for that. 15 minutes every Friday. No,
Oh, 15 minutes.
Not right before Shabbat.
I can't believe you guys are curious about that. You know what I'm curious about, Sarah? Is there a Chabad in the Amazon?
Well,
First, there are the people in the
question.
Amazon. First, you have to ask are the people in the Amazon. I want to tell you, in the entrances
You're slacking, Rabbi. There should be a Chabad.
in the entrance, and let me tell you, in the entrance to the Amazon in Peru, and one or two other places, they actually have Chabad, and these are the places where people come first, and then they go into the Amazon either alone or with groups. And these Chabad houses do incredible work. I mean, I know for Pesach they can do a seder for 1,000 people. They have hundreds of people all the time. Now it's quiet because of COVID, but they do incredible work and they wake up a lot of souls who are to their Judaism. So it's actually there is a lot being done in these places wherever they can. So hi, Dina. So what I want to actually talk today, deviate, which is not really deviating, it's just another subject in there. We are today, this Friday, is sort of sandwiched in between two very important days in the Chabad story. And obviously the Tanya, the teachings we're learning is the Kabbala based, Chabad based on the Kabbala. And last week Sunday, this past Sunday was the yard site, was the anniversary of the Rebbe's passing, set 27 years ago. And this coming Tuesday is the anniversary. I think it's 94 years of his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, who was arrested in Russia at that time under communist Russia as a counter-revolutionary, basically arrested for the death penalty. And I'll tell you more in a second. And he was miraculously, which they never did, released and from prison and allowed to be a free person, and eventually to leave shortly after to leave Russia. What was special about what was the context, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about is something that's a very important component you find throughout Judaism. What was the context was that the communism swept, the revolution took over Russia. The Bolshevik Revolution eventually turned to the Communist Revolution, took over Russia, and by 1920, they were starting their purge of God from Russia. The whole communism is built on an anti-God movement, an atheistic movement, and they were purging God, and they were trying to close down all religions. But unfortunately, many Jews got caught up in the communist wave, which initially was promising equality and freedom from oppression and all the other things that always the nice ideologies of these movements that never happened. So many Jews who lived for hundreds and hundreds of years in Russia under tremendous poverty and pale settlement, where Jews were only allowed to live in certain areas and never in the big cities, and it was hard to make a living, and the pogroms, et cetera, et cetera. And so many Jews, joined the movement. I mean, Karl Marx was a Jew who was one of the big, started the movement, and they really were hoping to be able to live freely. But little did they know that they were mostly being brought into a trap, and the trap was that the communism was no different than any other government, except that a few people held power and everyone else was there at their beck and call. So many of these Jews who got caught up in the ideology, initially part of the ideology was that God is what separates people, so we're going to get rid of God, and they believed in it. So the Jewish element of the KGB, which was the instrument they used to try to purge religions, had a special unit just for Jews, and they were more enthusiastic, unfortunately, which is not uncommon for self-hating Jews, who were more enthusiastic about closing down Jewish institutions than others were about closing down the other religious, whether it's the Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, or other institutions. So within a very few short years, even though Russia had the biggest Jewish population then, of 5-6 million, they closed down every synagogue, except 2 or 3 cities. They kept one symbolically open. They closed down every school, every higher school of learning, yeshiva. They filled every mikveh with cement. Every Jewish symbol and institution was closed down in a rush, in a matter of just 2 or 3 years, finished. The previous Rebbe, who just assumed the leadership of the Chabad leadership and of the Jewry, saw what was happening and realized that he had to, if he wanted to save the Jewish people there, he's going to have to do something heroic. He didn't look at it as heroic, but he had to do something heroic, and he started single-handedly to fight the vast communist regime. And he started to enlist people who were ready to build underground Jewish movement. And as they were closing synagogues, they were opening up underground synagogues, underground schools, underground mikvahs, everything underground. And what happened was that the Russian government was closely eyeing what's going on, that they closed everything down, but yet they still see so many Jews who are walking as Jews with a yarmulke, many with beards and everything else. And they couldn't understand where this is coming from, how they're closing everything down, where it's coming from, until they sort of caught on that it's all stemming from the previous Rebbe, who had an army of hundreds and hundreds of people who were putting their life on the line simply, meaning if you were caught teaching Torah to under communism, you would be sent to the gulags, and most people wouldn't come back, or you would be shot right away. So anyone who volunteered to be part of this vast underground network was putting their life on the line, and obviously he himself as well was putting his life on the line because he was running it all, and there was money needed and other things. So there was a lot of things going on. And actually, he brought 10 young men, and they got together like a quorum, like a minyan, a quorum of 10, and they took an oath that they are going to leave no stone unturned, even to death, to keep Judaism alive. And these 10 men spread out all across Russia to different regions and sort of led the underground movement and did incredible heroic things. And they kept Judaism alive. And the reason there were any Jews still to be let out of Russia in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s is because of this movement, this underground movement that kept Judaism alive, or else everyone would have been lost to their Jewish heritage and to even their Jewish identity. But they arrested him in 1927. They finally caught up with him. They arrested him, and they put him in prison. Initially, they were going to give him the death penalty. Miracles that they didn't, and then there was a lot of pressure, international pressure, which generally Russia did not respond. And I'll tell you a few interesting stories. I want to just share with you a very important concept of which comes from the book of Tanya. And he was sent initially to exile, but then they totally commuted his sentence and he was let free. But they had to leave Russia because they were too much. They were like watching him every move and every step, that it was impossible for him to do anything. And he felt that if he leaves Russia, he can still run the operation from outside of Russia, which he did when he left Russia. So it's like sandwiched between two very important days. One of the things that the previous Rebbe displayed was what we call in Hebrew this idea of self-sacrifice, or mesirat nefesh, which is self-sacrifice, which is meaning the readiness to die for something you believe in, the readiness to die for our faith, for our religion, for what we are. This concept is not a daily concept, meaning on a regular basis, you don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm ready to die for my religion. We hopefully wake up every morning, we say, I'm ready to live for what I believe in, and for what I, for my faith, or for my way of life, etc. No one wakes up ready to die. But there are moments when we are in situations, sometimes a person may face that one time, or like they did in communist Russia, it was a daily experience where, yes, every time you try to do something Jewish, you're putting your life in danger. So some people, it's one time in their life, they may be put in a situation, and in the past history, we've had a lot of it, forced conversions, those types of things. We know the Moranos in Spain and the Inquisition. There was a lot of that displayed, and throughout our history, we had many, many times, unfortunately, when this type of behavior was the self-sacrifice, people ready to die for their religion rather than change their religion, rather than abandon their religion. Whatever walk of life they came from, whether they were very religious or observant before or not, but when the choice came to abandon your identity and who you are, and turn your back on it, most Jews, the large majority, the vast majority, chose to rather die than to totally turn their back on God and Judaism. But the previous Rebbe lived with it every day of his life, meaning when as a leader in Russia and the communism, every day for 8 years, it was every day. And he didn't just lead it, but he was helping many others lead that way of life. And it's an incredible, how do we all love life, right? We all love to live. Why would someone die and give up the love to live for something? I mean, it's very nice to believe in something. It's very nice to hold on to something, to have something you're very attached to. But at the end of the day, we'd rather live than die, right? We'd rather live than die. So why are we ready? Why would someone be ready to die? Why would someone be ready to die for something they believe in?
Because maybe they can't feel like they can live without that thing.
Okay, that obviously makes sense, is that they believe in something so much, and you can't live without the, or with the knowledge that you buckled for something that you really believed in. And that's true. Usually people were ready to even die. People were ready to even die for non-religious things, for people who believed in years ago. If someone believed in a certain philosophy or a certain science or a certain other important piece of information, and they were having a hard time, getting their, what they believed in sort of to be adopted, they were happy to die to help get what they believed in adopted. So in reality, there are two ways to live. Live, as we know, we're learning, life is not just living, cruising through life. Living is living for something meaningful, something deeper, something important in your life. So we always have to identify with something important. The more we identify with something important, the more that becomes my identity. That identity could sometimes be more important than my life. Because if my identity is a certain belief or a certain statement, if I don't die for that statement, then my whole identity is gone. That's what Lara, you were saying. Your identity is gone. So our identity is more important when you really believe in something. It's more important than your life itself. So you're going to live a little longer. But if your life live without identity, what value do you have? But if I have an identity that will live on, even though I'm not here, that still has value. So the idea of self-sacrifice, of someone ready to die for something, is because of their identity. That's why in the Second World War, the kamikazes, the Japanese had kamikazes, pilots who went to die. They went into the battle not to hopefully bomb and come back. The kamikaze planes were suicide missions, the first suicide missions. Why? Because these people were drilled in with their identity as Japanese is more important than living. And their best way of showing their identity as a Japanese is by kamikaze. And so too, many people are ready to die, soldiers in any army ready to die for their country, because their identity of who they are becomes more important. Those who willingly go, or it becomes more important than life itself. But that makes sense. That's actually very logical. It's almost illogical for someone who has such a strong identity with something to just abandon it. So in Jewish history, we had once a false messiah called Shabtai Tzvi. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Shabtai Tzvi. So Shabtai Tzvi was a false messiah. He claimed that he was a messiah. It was a very difficult time in Jewish history, about in the 1500s, in the early, in the 1600s. Anyways, 1648, 49, around that time. Anyways, he came. It was a difficult time for Jewish people in Europe, and he claimed he was a messiah. It was very controversial. Most people didn't buy into him. And then he was arrested by the Turks because they thought that this guy's trying to throw over the ruling party. This guy's claiming he's a king, the Messiah king. And they arrested him and they gave him a choice in prison that if he converts to Islam, they'll keep him alive. But if he doesn't, they'll kill him. And he converted to Islam. So for him, and it was very devastating for a lot of Jews who believed that he was going to be the Messiah. Then the guy converted to Islam. So what does it mean? So it's a very difficult time for the people who followed him, who sort of believed that he's really onto something. But for a guy like that, he obviously didn't believe he's the Messiah. To him, living was more important than what he believed in. It was a letdown. Many people rather believe in something and die for it because that becomes their identity. So in reality,
I have a
Yeah.
question. Even if he converts to Islam according to the law, he could still pray to whatever, he could still follow what he really, no one has to know what you really believe.
but in Judaism, even if you convert just very externally, but you don't mean it, like in Spain, when the church was forcing Jewish people to convert, many Jews then, the Marranos means swine, but because that's what they called them. They didn't really believe that they converted. In Hebrew, we call them anusim, which means they were forced, because there was a lot of pressure for them to. It was a good life in Spain, and they were going to take it all away. But most people who converted to Christianity then didn't believe it. They converted just to sort of save their life and lifestyle that they had. They didn't believe it. Actually, many of them made their own little synagogues in their basements, and there's a lot about it, not to hear for here. But over generations, it got lost. That's why even till today, you may find in South America and other places where people still light a candle in a closet once a week, and when they sweep their rooms, they sweep it away from the doorpost, not towards the doorpost, because of the mezuzah. There are a lot of interesting things signs that you find, that somewhere in the line there was a Marrano. But but still, it's not. You're not supposed to. Judaism, it's not about whether you believe fully or not. Just the action of sort of turning your back on God is a terrible sin. So not a terrible sin. It's something that Jews generally didn't do. The Marranos in Spain were an exception, not the rule. Only place where many people, not everybody, but a large group of people converted to another religion was in Spain. Otherwise, Jews throughout history always chose death rather than convert. So getting back to, but if you take it a little bit deeper, because that's what we do in Tanya, the inner part, the Kabbala is take one layer off. In reality, it's very noble for someone to die, to believe in, because they believe their identity becomes aligned with something that how could they sort of let go of their identity just to live? Now, the other people today, in the Muslim world, there are a lot of people going on suicide bombers because they're promised rewards. To them, they're doing it because there's a reward. Something they can never get in this world, they can get in the world to come, whatever, the virgins, whatever else they promised them, whatever. But even if it's just because of your identity, in reality, as noble as it is, and it is noble, because many people look, Shabtai Tzvi was rather live. As noble as it is, but subtly, your identity is aligned with your ego. I mean, it's about me. I decided that I am more me if I die for something than if I live for something. It's a very subtle difference. It's still about you. It's about how you will go down in your book or in history book as someone who believed or someone who just had no backbone and didn't believe. So it's about you. We find Abraham, the first Jew, right when he declared that he believed in one God, monotheism, which was very unusual. Then everyone was worshiping idols. So God gave him 10 tests. The first test that he had, and the 10th test that he had, were the only ones where his life was in danger. Every other test he had was difficulty. There was a hunger, he had to leave his homeland. There were issues, but they were tests about how strong his faith is, but they were never life and death. The only one that was life and death was the first and the 10th. But they were very different. So in the first test, Abraham believes in God. He starts telling the people, stop worshiping idols. There's only one God, and you got to believe in him. And then there's this King Nimrod, who is like Iraq. Saddam Hussein built himself on Nimrod. His idol is Nimrod. That's what he puts all over. He put pictures of himself all over, and everywhere you go, that's what Nimrod did. Nimrod was like his own God, and he wanted everyone to worship it, and to see his picture, and they bow down. So Nimrod, who was sort of the king of that, the area where Abraham lived, caught Abraham and said, listen, Abraham, there is no God that you talk in the heavens. There is no one God. There is idols. I am a God. He gave Abraham a choice. Abraham, either you renounce your God and accept me and our gods, or I will throw you into this big burning flame. He built a stadium and he invited everyone to come to watch the first auto de fe, the first burning. And Abraham said, I'm never going to renounce God. And he threw him into the fire. And Abraham had no idea that a miracle would happen, but a miracle happened and God saved him from the fire. It didn't burn him, it didn't affect him. That was the first test of Abraham. The 10th test of Abraham, it wasn't his life, it was his son's life. The 10th test of Abraham was where God tells him, Abraham, take your only son Isaac. Oh. Debbie, sorry, I'm not sure how long you were off. Abraham is take your son Isaac, your only son, your only child, with Sarah, and I want you to sacrifice him to me and end his life. Abraham puts up no argument, and he prepares and he takes his son, and he wasn't a baby. His son was 37 at that time. He takes his son and he's ready to sacrifice. Last minute, God says, no, it's not what we meant. It was just a test. Don't sacrifice your son, keep him alive. And once he had that 10th test, God says, now I'm not going to test you anymore. Your faith is ironclad. So what's the difference between the first and the 10th test? Actually, the first test, he was going to lose his life. The 10th test was his child's life. So it's not easy to lose a child. Very difficult, very hard to lose a child. Your only child. But what's inherently different between the first and the 10th test? Why God would need both of them? And why was that all of a sudden when it was clear that now his faith is ironclad? The difference is that in the first test, Abraham was a person who identified with God, the belief in one God, monotheism. When Nimrod said, renounce it, Abraham said, I can't renounce it. This is who I am. My identity is aligned with one God. What am I going to become? I'm going to become a shmata, a rag. What am I going to become if I give it up? So who am I? I'm a nobody, no backbone, no nothing. I can't face the world. I'm ready to die. Wow, incredible. But that was still a decision that came from his ego, not a negative, very, very positive, very noble, but it came from his ego about me. How do I look better? Dead because of what I believed in, or alive because I'd rather live? So it was a choice, not an easy choice, but it was a choice that he made. When it came to the 10th test, we got to sacrifice your only son, end his life. Here, it wasn't a question of my identity, my faith. Actually, by Abraham sacrificing his own life, sacrificing his son, he was actually going to destroy everything he stood for. Abraham built a life based on belief in one God, taught it to people, brought a child to this world after many years of being childless, brought a child to this world, taught him to live in that way as well. Taught him to live in that way as well. And now God says, sacrifice your only son, meaning there's no future. Whatever you did till now, it's over. There's no future. There's no one going to carry on, because other people that he influenced, he influenced them, but they don't have the, but this kid grew up absorbing it, immersed in it for 37 years, every day and night with both his parents who were, it's over. So meaning by Abraham listening to God, he would actually be moving backwards. So it's not like I'm aligning myself with my identity. And therefore, if I don't die, I have no backbone. On the contrary, Abraham should have turned to God and said, God, it doesn't make any sense. You promised me I'm going to have a son, and he's going to carry on, whatever we face, and we'll build a nation out of him. But if I kill him, all you things you promised me, and I kept to my part till now, are going to be gone. It's going to be over. It's going to be finished. The business will be finished. The whole thing I worked for will be finished. So actually, Abraham's identity would have been much more aligned if he would have said to God, no, I'm not doing it, because you're causing me to go backwards, to lose everything I ever stood for. But Abraham did not argue with God. He did not come back and put up a fight. Why? Because his faith in God was so strong that even if it was working against him, he still would do what God wants, not what he thinks is best. So this act of self-sacrifice that Abraham had at that moment, ready to do, he didn't have to, but God saved the last moment, but he was ready to do at the last moment, was the opposite of everything we spoke about till now. Was not about his own personal ego, identity. It was the opposite of that. It was total submission to a greater force, to God. That type of self-sacrifice is not logical. It's not something you can come to the conclusion, sitting down and make a calculation, say, that's the logical conclusion. It's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. The only way you can come to that conclusion is if your faith in God is more about God than it is about you. If our faith in God is about me, if I'm in the right place, if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm going to feel good afterwards, if I'm going to get the right rewards, if that is what it's all about, then Abraham couldn't sacrifice his son. But if it's about, I'm here for God, whatever God wants takes precedence over me, then your faith is like that. Then, like Abraham, you don't question God. God said, you do. Now, it's interesting. The same Abraham, when God wanted to turn over Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham put up a big fight because it wasn't his test. Sodom and Gomorrah was not his test. Sodom and Gomorrah was an event that was happening to other people. Abraham, as the good fighter for justice and kindness, put up a fight with God, argued, how could you do that? And Sodom and Gomorrah was a city full of people that had terrible character. They deserved a big punishment. But yet he put up a fight. Maybe they're good people amongst them. Maybe we can turn them around. But when it came to his own son, there was no fight. He had faith. If that's what God wants of me, that's what I do. That is a self-sacrifice that very few people actually display. Most people are ready to die for anything that you found in history. If you read, it was all about aligning themselves with what they identify with, their ego, who they are. It's about me, but not about God. It could be because of God. The kamikazes didn't die, and they died because they were Japanese. The other people died because for other reasons. It could be the reason is God. And so it's noble. And it's incredible. You deserve a big pat on your back and you're incredible. But it's still a different realm. And this is Abraham was one person. And Jews throughout history were ready to do it. And like Larry, you asked, some of them could have just faked it, like the Marano said, faked it, yeah, we'll convert, and tomorrow we'll escape somewhere and we'll be Jews again. but it didn't even enter their mind. If God said that's not acceptable, even though it makes sense, I can be loyal to God. Not even one iota, not even one moment to get off the track of what God wants us to do. That's faith at the highest level. And that self-sacrifice can only come from a faith at the deepest level. So the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, that's the faith he displayed. Because he, in Russia, officially, even when communism came about, if a person was personally religious, there was no rule in communism that they can persecute or prosecute anyone who is religious. The laws war, you're not allowed to teach religion to others, you're not allowed to make gatherings of religious people. So the previous Rebbe, who was very pious and very very observant, could have led his life observantly and religious, and he could have led his life, and that way not a problem. But yet, it wasn't about him. His dedication wasn't about his life. Because I know I can lead my life. I can even run away from Russia and make it out of there. And like many rabbis, many of the leaders of the Jewish community ran away from Russia. When communism was, when the curtain was coming down, the Iron Curtain, they ran away. And they left millions of Jews without any leadership. The previous Rebbe was the only one who decided to stay. Said, this is where God put me, this is where I have to be. It was not about him, it was totally about God and what he's here for. And that type of faith and self-sacrifice was so real, was so that when anyone who we spoke to, like he gathered 10 young men, these people were in their 20s, young 20s, that had a full life ahead of them. And they put their lives in the danger, and the heroic things they did are incredible. They're books and books on how they did, and I'll tell you, like my God willing, next year, my son's becoming bar mitzvah, so I'm taking my family to Israel, and we're going to stop in Ukraine, where I come from, where my parents come from, and we're going to visit the city where my mother was born, and my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my grandmother's parents, were well-to-do before the communist revolution. So they had a big house and a nice sized shed in the back, which was unusual. And then communism came, and they lost everything. They lost their business, whatever they lost. But they didn't kick them out of their house. They let everyone sort of stay in their houses. But they closed the yeshiva in their city. They closed the mikveh. They filled it with cement. So my great grandparents took their shed in the back where they used to keep, like in Russia, everyone used to keep during the winter all their food to keep it cold. They didn't have refrigerators. That's what they turned it into a mikveh, and it was with great danger. They dug a hole there. They brought water. It was a very difficult thing to do because there were watching eyes all over. So now the people in the town, the women can have a place where they can go to the mikveh. And my grandmother, growing up, she was a kid, had no idea. They were just told you can't go there anymore. They had no idea, because if the Russians caught these kids, they may spill the beans. So I'm just telling you, there's how did the previous Rebbe turn people, these 10 young men, hundreds of thousands of people? Because when you see purity, when you see faith at the highest level of truth, it's like a fire that catches you. You know, when you're standing next to a fire, even if you're not hot on your own, you're going to become hot soon. And the closer you are to the fire, the hotter, the warmer you're going to become. And the people saw the previous Rebbe's total dedication, total disregard of it. It's not about him at all. It's not about him and what's better for him or what will be more meaningful for him. It's about what we can do for others to help other people stay connected, stay Jewish, have the opportunity to teach their children. My father went to one of these underground schools before the war. He was a little kid. This is self-sacrifice on the highest level. This self-sacrifice on a level where there's, like, in your world, there's only you and God. And while he was in prison, one of the reasons they imprisoned him was, besides giving him the death penalty, to cut off the head of the movement, was that they were trying to get from him a list of all the people who are working with him underground, all the hundreds of thousands. Not one name. They got not one name. But in the interim, they tortured him terribly. And he suffered later years of his life with many sicknesses because they tortured him terribly to try to get, but he didn't give anything. Anyways, at one time, they were getting very frustrated. So one of the interrogators, one of the commanders, sitting in the interrogation room and he's not talking. So he took out his gun and put it on his forehead. And he said, listen, either you start speaking or else we're going to kill you right now. It's enough. Either you speak, either give us names or we're going to kill you right now. And the previous Rebbe, and he wrote his memoirs. He wrote about this whole month he was in prison, whatever. See, he says like this. He says that when he pointed the gun, I looked him straight in the eye and I told him that toys like this only scare people who believe in one world and many gods. But people like myself who believe in one God and two worlds, this gun doesn't scare me. When your faith is strong, there's only you and God. There's nothing that gets in the way of you and God. No person, no monster, no idea. Nothing gets in the way between you and God. This is the ultimate. And in Tanya we study how it's important for us to understand the ultimate. It's important for us to understand what the highest attainable human level that we can have. Because even though most of us, hopefully will never have to be tested in that type of situation, but although most of us will not get there, but by knowing that, well, hold on, wait a few minutes. But by knowing that, it helps us strive towards there. And when we strive towards there may be a moment in our life, one moment, or one type of behavior, or one type of situation, where we have that same exact feeling that nothing gets between my faith in God and myself. Nothing gets in between. Nothing scares me. Nothing, no anxiety, no stress, no issues. No matter what I'm facing in front of me, I know at the end of the day, it's not what's facing in front of me that'll decide my fate. It's God that decides my fate. And all of us can have at least a moment where we can sort of identify with that. And that's what the previous Rebbe stood for. And because of his incredible faith, which sort of osmosis got so many other people involved, against the mighty Soviet regime that put their entire force to destroy religion, despite all of that, he kept it alive. So one second. He kept it alive for years after he left, kept Judaism alive, that when they opened up the doors for Russian Jewry to leave in the 80s, there were millions still left to leave. There were millions left to leave. That's what this type of faith does. And when his father passed away in 1920, right before they started to implement the thing. So when his father passed away, the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, he told him in his deathbed, he said, communism is very dark, but a darkness and an evil like this can't last more than 60, 70, 80 years. If we stand strong, we'll overcome. It's exactly what happened. In the 80s, communism fell apart. 1989, it didn't even take a war. Communism fell apart on its own. on its own dysfunctional being. So this is what these 2 days were sandwiched in between, because as the previous Rebbe did it in Russia, in Soviet Russia, then came to America, the Rebbe continued. They did it in America, but in a very different way. In America, thank God, Jews don't have to worry about their lives. Yeah, there's been anti-Semitism, some eruptions, but we're not worried about our lives. We're safe here. We're good. We have the tools to be safe here. We have the freedoms to be able to do what we need to do. But here, we are in danger spiritually. The Jewish soul's in danger spiritually. The world soul's in danger also spiritually. The world is trying to very much fight the idea of a God, of a greater force. There's a tremendous battle in academia, there's a tremendous battle in culture, there's a tremendous battle in the media, where God is not part of the picture at all. There is no other force. It's just us, humanity. So it's a tremendous battle. And we're losing a lot of people to any type of appreciation, like we spoke last week, of spirituality or anything else like that. And it took the same type of incredible faith of nothing will stop me, nothing will get in the way between us and our faith in God, to revive Jewish life and the Jewish spirit post-Holocaust and in the Western world, in America, which is what the Rebbe did really. And really what we have and see all over is really a big part of his work, not only in far-flung places where the only people there are Chabad, but within the general Jewish world, wherever you go, from Israel to other places. It was the Rebbe with the same type of self-sacrifice, but not of dying for it, but of living proudly and not being shy and embarrassed in any way of who we are and what we stand for, and our sense of duty and our sense of connection to God, and that God plays a big role in our lives. And therefore, we're able to much more have this discussion openly and get more people to at least be exposed to it in a full and complete way. So this is just sort of these 2 days that were sandwiched in between, and what they represent, and what they, how they have affected us today. Because if not for the previous Rebbe's, communism spread through a lot of the world. If not for his fight in Russia, Jews, which occupied not only 5-6 million in Russia, but the other countries that became communist, it would have been totally gone. Totally gone. And in the Western world, Jews, we'd still be eating gefilte fish or dafina, but that's about it. We wouldn't be doing much more. There maybe be a few corners of Jews, 2 or 3 cities or 4 cities that they still have some kind of things, but otherwise Jews would have been swept up in the torrents and the tsunamis of the modern day Western world, like other religions as well, exactly the same way are war being. So this is just help us understand what it is that keeps, what are the strong, what are the sandbars, what are the strong things. Faith is the ultimate wall that keeps us protected and keeps us straight, etc. So this is and continue. So this is in short a little bit about.
Very interesting.
Yeah. What's the name of the book of when he was in prison?
It's called I have to get the name in English.
In English, can I
I'll
get
get
it?
it. No, he wrote it in Yiddish, but translated in English. I'll
Okay.
find the name.
Okay, I'm curious. Thank you.
I'll find the name. It's an incredible.
I'm- It must be amazing. I want to read it. It sounds amazing. It takes one though, and
Called The Prince in Prison.
Okay, Prince in Prison.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Any comments, questions, anything?
I have one, Rabbi. So you were saying, from what I understood before, that, your life is sacred and God, wants you to save yourself if at all possible. So when you say that, these righteous people died because, their identity and they couldn't go on. So does that mean that there are exceptions? Like, for example, if, you can't choose a cause that is, frivolous to die for, that God wouldn't want you to do. But if it's your core belief, then it's okay to sort of, basically, because unless there's a miracle, if you make bad choices, you will die, right? So I'm like conflicted with that. So are we supposed to save ourselves, or
No.
is it okay?
You are,
what you believe
now
in?
you are, in Judaism, there's a law that when in certain circumstances, you have to die rather than just be saved. So I'm not saying against it. And I wasn't knocking people who do it because it takes a lot of tremendous courage and etc. I was just saying, we're here always to look a little deeper, that even amongst people who are ready to die for a cause, or for a cause, even for the religion, etc., it's not always about their faith. It's sometimes, a lot of times it could be about them, and not negative, in a positive way, but it's still about them, as opposed to total faith, where it's about God, and it's about who we believe in, rather than how I make my bigger mark for myself or the world around. So yeah, I mean, there are unfortunate times. Thank God we live in a time where we're not tested with these things.
And I had one more quick question.
Sure.
Thank you for that. So the Rebbe, Yosef Itzhak Schneerson, was actually the Rebbe that I know about's father-in-law, correct?
That's right, yes.
So
the previous Rebbe was his father-in-law, yeah.
so how did he take the name, or how did he become, so he married his daughter and then he
He
realized.
had the same last name. They were distant relatives. They had the same last name.
And but then he knew, at one point you were saying, this fake Messiah, from what I understood, like a Jew never says, I'm the Messiah,
100%.
right? So how did, for example, the rabbi that we would have known, who passed away, 27 years ago, how did he know, or how was he given the right to sort of take over the movement and continue? Like, how did that happen? Or is that a whole other class?
No, first of all, the movement does not do with the Messiah. The movement is about the movement, but he took it over because the people of the movement asked him to take it over. He was the best candidate who was there to take it over, so he took it over. But he was a son-in-law. Usually it was in the family, but he was a son-in-law. But there was another son-in-law, but he was the one they felt was the right one, and he took over. But that's another discussion, what that's maybe more, but I'm saying, but that's sort of in short what happened. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Debbie, you're still on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we don't see your face.
I know, I have an ugly face today.
But we feel your presence.
Yeah, no, I'm joking with you. I'm on my personal phone because I was walking, so it
No
doesn't
problem,
do the
no way.
same thing.
No problem. I just wasn't sure. Good.
Yeah.
So nice.
And
to
call
have you
me
back.
after if you wanted to ask me
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
Rabbi.
I will. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
ciao.
So be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thanks, Rabbi.
All the best. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week, and all the best. Yeah.
Okay.
Be well.
Bye, you too.
Bye-bye.